Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today I am very excited because I have another fantastic guest for you. So my guest today spent half his life bootstrapping his startup business to an industry leader. His desire to teach what he spent his career learning led him on a remarkable journey through the gates of a minimum security prison, where he taught entrepreneurship for almost 3 years. He has an MBA, a teaching certificate, and a marketing management certificate from Harvard Extension University. So a very, very, very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, John McLaughlin. How are you, John?
Hey, Paul, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm a fan of the show. I find it very inspirational. I think the title of your podcast is absolutely perfect. My Perfect
Wonderful,
Failure.
wonderful. I've got a perfect guess. So,
well, when I saw the name, I wanted to be on it because failure is how you learn.
I was very excited when we connected because I immediately, as you know, when you engage with people, you kind of want to kind of see how we can mesh a wonderful discussion together. And I love anybody that's an entrepreneur. You tick that box in spades. So we're going to get into that a little bit, and also what you're doing and what you have been doing to support inmates in prisons and so forth. So we're going to get into that in a second. So yeah, so there's this lovely blend of inspiring things that you've done. And I guess that I imagine along the way, you must have learned heaps.
Oh, you can't imagine. Working for yourself, you learn from your mistakes, basically. Yeah. I mean, they don't really have seminars for you to go to where they can train you. You learn because you do something wrong and you better learn how to fix it pretty quick. So yeah. I mean, it's exactly, that's why you look at the failure rate of small businesses so high.
Yeah.
Because the only way to learn is by doing it wrong and then correcting it, honestly.
Yeah. I was listening to something you said on one of your shows that you appeared on where you were talking about, I'm sure you referenced the idea that when you're, I guess, starting your own business as an entrepreneur, really in an ideal scenario, you want to be able to lean into somebody that is an entrepreneur that is further ahead of you, where she can really guide us in terms of those challenging moments, because clearly they're going to arrive at some point.
That's how you learn. And what happened to me is I got into a master's program, not to jump ahead, but I was one of the few people there that worked for myself because everybody else there was trying to climb the corporate ladder, get a certificate. And it opened the doors for me to speak to some entrepreneur classes of some younger people, some undergraduate classes. And what I realized was they were going to make the same mistakes I had made, and I could steer them away from it. Whereas they hadn't learned it from a book necessarily. But if I told them, no, here's what happened, or I knew a guy that did this. For instance, I had some people that wanted to get into a 50-50 partnership. And as starting out, and I told him, this is a really bad idea. I've never seen that work because one guy's going to want to go one way. Somebody else going to go the other way. We got to dissolve the business. A business needs a leader. And, well, we want to be 50-50 partners. Don't do it. I mean, I can tell you right now, it's going to sooner or later going to come apart. Just small things like that you would go into innocently. But if you haven't experienced it, you would think, well, this is a great idea. But if you've lived it and seen people that have done that come to a crossroads and split the business up, and it's very painful and very costly. Just small things like that you would go into with the honest, intent, but not knowing it wouldn't work until it was too late.
Yeah, absolutely. So entrepreneurship for you, I know your dad was very influential, but I was keen to get or to give me and the audience, people watching, listening, insights into how it began for you.
It's kind of funny because I'm not the type of person that would start a business. I'm not a big risk taker at all. I play very conservatively, and I always have. But it just so happened my dad started and working in a factory, never went to high school, started working in a factory, and he worked his way up over probably 25, 30 years to national sales manager of the same company, which is a pretty amazing thing to do when you figure he never went to college. He just worked his way to sales, worked his way to sales manager, all the way up the ladder. Well, one day they didn't need him anymore. New management comes in and they see how much we're paying this guy. He's got all these benefits. He's 55 years old. He's got 6 weeks vacation. He's out. So just unceremoniously, a guy he put his heart and soul into this company, somebody else's company, and was shown the door with all his buddies who he built the company with. He walked out the door and said, I will never work for anybody else again.
That's brutal.
Yeah, and it happens all the time. You have value when you're young and hustling and working hard and building. But as you get older, it's easy to replace the older worker with a younger one because he doesn't have the benefits built up and he's hungrier. So he said, I'm going to start my own business doing exactly what I've done for my whole life. And he started just kitchen table with no money, and built it for a couple of years. And then I got out of college and he offered me a job. He said, we don't have any money in this business, but I can afford to buy you a car. You get you a company car. We're going to go out. And we're in sales. We sell material handling, metal lockers, shelving. And I thought, well, I can learn a lot from this guy, but I mean, we're working out of the dining room of his apartment. And this is looking really, really, really risky to me. I could see investing some time and energy into this startup business and it's going to fail. And then I got nothing to show for it. I got to go back and start over. But I knew I could learn from him. So I told him, I'll work for you for 2 years. And then that's it. I'm going to go work for a big, safe company, which is exactly what he had done. And you could see how that worked out. But he didn't correct me. He let me learn myself that the real risk in life is placing your fate in somebody else's hands, which is what he did. So talk about my perfect failure. My perfect failure was almost not giving entrepreneurship a chance. That would have been a big life changer for me. I only lucked into it. It wasn't like I was this great entrepreneurial mind that had all these great ideas. No, I wanted to play it safe, but it was put right in front of me. So I did it. And as I went down the road, I realized, well, this is where you need to be. There's no ceiling here. We can change our products. We can change all kinds of things if things go wrong, but I don't have a boss and I don't have anybody who's going to keep me down. So I'm the accidental entrepreneur. Honestly, I wouldn't have never gone down that road without circumstances lining up.
That sounds like another book, Accidental Entrepreneur. I like that.
Exactly. But
maybe it was birthed here, or conceived here.
And I think a lot of my job as I was teaching was to convince people this isn't risky like you think it is, like you're told it is. Working for yourself you can do it. Just got to be careful. You need some guidance.
Yeah. What's very interesting around that is that when I speak to entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that I follow, a lot of them, they echo what you've said around that ability to control your own destiny and make your own decisions, because it happens so much globally where we're settled, we're in a business. Maybe we're not even settled. We can be settled, but we can be in a business and we might not be fulfilling, might not be exciting. We have no strategic influence in the business, even when we've got good things to say. The value's not there. We do that. We put in blood, sweat, and tears, like your dad. And then, because I've been made redundant, but I've also got lots of my peers that have been in seemingly steady jobs. And then all of a sudden, there's a meeting is called. Everybody needs to be in early on a particular day, or even if we're in, we all suddenly cancel meetings, regardless of what the meeting is. It might be a sales meeting where I'm looking to close a deal, cancel it, done, go to a meeting, and we're told some pretty devastating news that, we're making some big changes. There's going to be some redundancies. It's going to be unpleasant. It's beyond our control. And half of the team will be going. Some of you will be staying. But even if you're staying, the energy and our enthusiasm is clearly compromised because a lot of our best pals from work are going. So I like your analogy about being able to have a farm. Obviously, it's going to be difficult, not easy, but we have far more control over our own destiny.
Very much so. And you don't know that until it's too late, typically. My wife worked for a company for 25 years. And shortly after she turned 60, there's a pop-up screen on her computer that says, prepare for your exit interview. That's it.
Easy.
you're done. I mean,
That's crazy.
pack your stuff, you know,
Mm,
we don't need you here anymore. And they've got
yeah.
every right to do that.
Oh, that
And
makes me angry.
it does. And then you're 60 years old without, you know, you've only done this one thing. It's really hard to start then.
Mm,
You know, it's really hard to
mm,
she's done well, but it's really hard to, you know, you didn't see it coming. You weren't prepared for it. Hopefully you've got some money saved up, but
yeah.
it's devastating. And it happens a lot. I mean, it could be a merger. Your company is bought by
Yeah,
another
yeah.
company. It's a
I've been
lot of
through
things
that
out
as
of your
well.
control.
Yeah,
Um, and when you work for somebody else, you're typically going to do one job.
yeah,
You're going to get good at that one job, but you're only going to do one job. If you work for yourself, you're going to do a lot of jobs. When you
yeah,
start out, you're going to do every job because
yeah,
there's nobody else there but you.
yeah. It's
So,
interesting around following entrepreneurs and connecting with entrepreneurs like you. Sometimes people hit 60 and they're just getting started
right.
because they've got like amazing ideas. They've still got this incredible enthusiasm, and that is their life. If you're in the right space, it doesn't have to be. You can retire, you can do what you want. But I think that invariably, when you go down that traditional avenue, everything's kind of almost set up. You know, college, uni, work. You know, do that for a number of years. You might do two or three quite consistent jobs, and then you kind of retire. And it's because it's not your baby, it's somebody else's baby. And to your
Right.
wife's point, it might be that they say that, okay, 60 or whatever the retirement age is, you reach that. So, you know, there isn't a position for you. Now we'll go through the exit strat process with you. But when it's your own baby, it's like this can go on until I say it doesn't go
Exactly right.
any longer. So you just have better career options and I guess satisfaction.
100%. I mean, I'm fortunate in that my company's done well. I put it in the hands of some very capable people,
Mm,
but I still work 3 days a week only
yeah.
because I want to.
Mm,
But they can't tell me not to.
yeah.
So if they don't want me to, they don't
Yeah.
say anything. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
here he is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can work as long as I want, really.
Yeah. So just getting into, I want to get into the prison stuff in a minute, but I just want to navigate around this entrepreneurship thing again because I think it's important while we've got you here that we extract as much intel we can for people that are entrepreneurs, that are on a journey, that have made mistakes, that maybe don't have maybe they're looking to develop that mental mindset to kind of navigate and really achieve the very best for them, their customers, their family, and whatever it may be. So, in terms, I guess, in your experience, if there's people listening and watching and they're thinking that they want to do their very best, what's the mindset of an entrepreneur, in your opinion?
For me, the whole key here is I've got to find a way to bring value to somebody's life.
Mm,
I got to make their life better is
yeah,
what I'm doing. And hopefully I'm doing it in a way that nobody else is doing. And if I can do that for enough people, then I can have a business, right? But I've got to find a way to make your life better,
yeah,
basically. Make it easier, more convenient, provide a service, something that you're not getting you didn't even maybe know you needed, but I can present it to you in a way that you think this will be great for me. You know, I'm willing to pay for this. And then if I've got enough people that are willing to do that, well, maybe I've got something here. When you start out, you may change direction 6 or 7 times until you figure out what it is that enough people find value in to pay for. It's to me, it's if you wanted to make it really boil it down to simplicity, that's what you're looking for. You know,
yeah,
it should be something that you're good at. It should be something that you enjoy doing. But the people that want that there has to be a lot of people that see value in it, and it
okay,
doesn't have to be anything, you know, technology. You could wash windows. You could,
mm,
you know, clean cars. You could cut yards, but maybe do it in a different way than they're
yeah,
seeing it now. Give them something they don't have or haven't, you know, thought of yet. And hopefully you can build up enough of a customer base to make it really run.
yeah,
If I had to break it down to simplicity, that's about it.
okay,
What can
yeah,
I do to
makes
bring
sense.
value to somebody else's life?
Makes sense. And do you see, or have you seen over the years, entrepreneurs make mistakes where they develop a business, but they don't go through the steps that you've just mentioned, which is almost make sure that you've got a market. So the idea might be, I've just got this amazing idea, which sounds amazing, but you've got no customers there. You haven't gone through the rigor of making sure that you've got some people that have got interest in your idea or your product or your service?
Happens all the time. There was some people just in my neighborhood a couple of years ago, maybe it was 7 or 8 years ago, and they were going to put an automatic lawnmower in your yard, and it was going to cut the yard for you. You just paid a monthly fee. They were going to maintain it. Seemed like a good idea,
Yeah.
but there just wasn't enough people that were willing
Yeah.
to do that. They didn't trust the machine or whatever reason, or maybe the price was too high. I mean, and the other thing is, whatever your target market is, the people that find value in it, they've got to be able to afford it. If
Yeah.
they don't have the money, then it doesn't matter how much they want it. They just won't buy it.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Okay.
You've got to make sure that the people are able to afford what it is you're offering.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've
Okay.
seen it a lot. I've absolutely seen it a lot, which is okay. You just got to change direction. You just hope you don't run out of money
Yeah.
while you're changing direction 3 or 4 times. But it happened. That's why the failure rate's so high, is because this
Okay.
isn't working out the way I thought. I'm not getting as the response I thought I would get, but I can change it and maybe this will work. Well, that didn't work either. Well, let me change it this way. And I've only got a little bit of time until I'm going to run out of money.
Yeah.
And then it's too late and I've got to start over, which is fine too. But there can be a time lag there until you figure it all out. Once you figure it
Yeah.
all out, it's golden, but it's time to get. So what I usually tell people is, if you want to start a business, go work for somebody in that same business
Okay.
and figure out what they're doing wrong in your eyes, or what could be done better. So if I wanted to start a landscape business, I'm going to go work for a landscaper. If I wanted to open a Italian restaurant, I'd go work in an Italian restaurant,
Yeah.
and I would see what the menu items are, what do people like, what do they not like, what's this guy doing different, is he treating his employees well? I'm going to do it differently than him in a way that serves his customers better than he is.
Yeah.
And that's a good learning experience. It doesn't cost you anything.
So how important is, I was listening to, again, some of your content today where you spoke about difficult moments and having people in your corner that say the right thing at the right time to give you that energy, that focus to carry on, or support, I guess is a good word to carry on. I was wondering, how important is it to have the right people in your corner, and also you've got to, I guess, have strong faith in whatever we're deciding to do.
The number one factor to me that determines success in this arena is determination.
Okay.
It's not the smartest people. It's not working hard is key. You're going to work as hard as you've ever worked in your life, maybe twice as hard as you've ever worked in your life. But it's the people that don't quit when things are bad. When things go bad, they don't just say, well, it's over, I'm going to go do something else. They keep pushing. And usually you're tested. I was tested to the point of, we had a lot of things change in the market that were out of my control. I made a perfect failure mistake in getting my overhead too high too quickly. I had too big of a building I was paying the lease on. I had too many employees that I couldn't afford to pay. And we hit a downturn in the economy, and I wasn't making enough money to pay the lease. And I was dumb enough to sign a 5-year lease. I was only 2 years in. I had 3 years to go on this lease, and I didn't see how I was going to be able to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And they were going to take my house if I didn't pay the rent. That's how the lease was written. So I was under the gun. And the only thing I could think of was, let's get out of this while we still can, before they take my house. Let me just sell it and get something for it and get somebody to take over this lease for me. And my best friend from 8th grade, who was my business partner, I told him, because he owned 20%, I gave him 20% of the business. And I told him, well, this is over. I've got a broker here. He thinks we can get enough money to get out of this, and we're just going to go in a different direction. He said, well, I'm not quitting. And I said, well, we're not going to make it. I mean, do you want to just keep going until we go down in flames? And he said, why don't you just quit crying and go out and do what you're good at and go get some more customers? That's all you need, is to go in a different market and find some new customers. And I told him, I said, I'll try it. I don't think I can save this, but because you're my best friend from 8th grade, I'm not, if you want to keep fighting, I'm going to stay and fight with you. But honestly, I don't see how in the world we're going to make it.
Yeah.
And once I made that decision, everything turned around. All the bad market forces changed. All of a sudden we were making more money than we'd ever made. But I was pushed to that point of, I was going to get out of it. I just had the right person at the right time tell me, you can do this. You just need to change your strategy and we'll be fine. And that's something I'll always be grateful for, because I wasn't strong enough to get through that on my own, but I had the person next to me who was.
It's really interesting because it does show me, you, and anybody watching, listening, the value of having the right people in our corner, because you quite easily could have had a conversation with somebody that could be quite well-meaning, and they were given their advice would be potentially to the best of their ability. But if they aren't of that same mindset, they could have been actually 100%. If you can get a broker to take the lease, you can find somebody to take the lease, 100% do that. And you could have done that, and you could have gone and got a steady job,
Huh?
because you might have been so burnt from the experience that you might have thought, you know what, I was always pushing it a little bit, trying to go down this entrepreneurship. Why don't I do what the majority of people do, have a nice steady job, I can get up to speed, and I can go through that process.
Right. It's too risky. This is too crazy. Right. Exactly. And it would have been almost anybody else probably would have told me you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
This guy's a fighter. He wasn't ever going to quit. And he's always been like that. And he knew me well enough to know that I could do it. I just didn't think I could,
Yeah.
He knew. So yeah,
Okay.
I mean, God bless him. So there's two perfect failure moments, one almost never trying it, and then one going to bail out when things get tough. And and I think how different my life would have been if either of those would have happened. Very, very different life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much less rewarding.
Mm. And I just conclude this, and we can go on to focus on your kind of like a different career path almost. And so just around entrepreneurship, and because I live in the UK. Historically, I've worked a lot in London, so you get jump on a tube and you see people not really, maybe it's the morning, but nobody seems, there are some people, but definitely a lot of people don't seem that enthused about getting on the tube and going to work and doing maybe 9 to 5. And I think there are a lot of people that do get 100% satisfaction from that. So it needs to be balanced in my sort of thoughts around this. But I think entrepreneurship can be a good life, and it can be an option. But I guess if people are thinking about that with, I guess, the internet, access to people like you who've got content out there, and other people, you can do it in probably an easier way than when you started, although it's going to be difficult, just because you've got the internet, you've got podcasts, you've got different tools and different people that you can speak to lean on for ideas. You don't have to be totally alone that you might have had to do when you started 30 odd years ago.
Oh, you're 100% right. I mean, it's amazing how much content, good content, is out there that's completely free.
Mm.
I mean, if you're in a jam or you want to start something, you're not sure, you need to know how to do accounting, you need to know how to do anything. It's right there for you. So yeah, I think it's the perfect time to do it. And you don't have to be trying to build a huge company. You could just have a little sideline, just something you do on the weekend and see where it goes. Maybe it turns into something big, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just something you like to do and you can make a little side money in it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe it'll grow and maybe it won't, or maybe you don't want it to grow, and that's okay too. But yeah, the content that you can get now is incredible compared to where it was when I started in the 80s, when, I mean, there wasn't an internet.
Yeah. So is it also one step at a time and not giant leaps, just in terms of how people should approach the process of building their business?
I'm sorry, I missed the.
Sorry. I was saying that, is it more so small steps rather than big leaps?
To me,
we kind of manage our expectations, because some people might expect or hope to see huge, because particularly these days you go on social media, everybody's doing well, everybody's an entrepreneur. That's obviously curated, so it can really skew people's thoughts about what it's like. It is a process where you kind of shouldn't expect things to happen like that overnight.
Oh, you couldn't be any more right about that. And that was one of my big hurdles teaching in prison, was these guys expected fast money.
Yeah.
And I, you got to tell them, hey, look, this is going to take you many years before you even got enough money to maybe hire somebody.
Yeah.
You might have to do all the work yourself for the first 3 or 4 years, just because you don't have the cash flow yet, and you're starting small. I mean, it took us 3 or 4 years to get out of the dining room, honestly. And even then we were in the smallest place I could rent that had a loading dock, because we needed one. And then that was 3 or 4 years there, and 3 or 4 years here, and 5 more years here. And slowly, we build up enough of a customer base, and we build enough financial reserves that we can move forward. But it's a very slow process. It's a
Yeah.
lifetime process.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's a lovely segue into almost a change of direction. Maybe you can describe why the change of direction and the focus and where you went. I'll leave it to you
Okay,
to
perfect.
give us an idea of how that happens.
Perfect. I mean, one thing I've learned about myself is I'm a builder. I like to take something that from nothing and build it to something. But
Mm,
once it's there, I don't have a lot of interest in maintaining it.
yeah.
It's just not me. So I felt like I had the company in a place with people running it. And if they wanted to make it bigger, that was fine. But I was happy with where it was. I didn't have any interest in going any further with that. I needed a new challenge. And my experience going back to school taught me that I actually could help people who wanted to start a business because I had the experience of making the mistakes of, 30 years of doing it. And so I decided I wanted to teach. And one thing I learned through my business experience by now, at this point in my life, in my early 50s, if you want something in this world, you just stay at it. Determination. I'm not
Yeah.
going to quit. I went back. But the problem was I was 50 years old. I had a lot of business experience, but I had no teaching experience at all. So nobody would even interview me. I couldn't get a job anywhere. I spent 7 years.
Crazy with all that experience.
Yeah. But if you go to these community colleges, they're looking for the degrees and they're looking for the people that have doctorates and have the formal education. Not what you need for entrepreneurship, but they're not looking at it any different than they would look at a medical degree. They just don't.
Mm.
So anyway, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep at this until I'm too old to do it. So I went back and got a teaching certificate. I went and got a certificate from Harvard, thinking that might impress somebody. I went out and spoke at community colleges. I got all the speaking engagements I could. Still couldn't get a job. And one day I saw this ad that said, we're looking for somebody to teach entrepreneurship in a minimum security prison. And I said, boy, I don't know about the prison part, but this is perfect for me because all they wanted was some business experience. And I was like, well, I got that. I mean, they can't say I don't have that.
Got to have a space.
Right. So I wrote them this thing and I filled out the application. And at the very end, and here's the thing, I had seen this job posted about 6 months previously and they didn't even interview me. I filled out the application. So this time when it came time to put in what's your teaching concepts, I didn't put the flowery stuff that they wanted, engage the learner, make it relevant. I put in all caps, there's no reason for you not to interview me for this job because if you hire me, I will put all the energy I put into building a business into this job, into teaching. And sure enough, next day the phone rang. Can you come interview at the prison to teach entrepreneurship? I finally got a job interview. It took me 7 years to get there. So we go to the prison. I've never been in a prison before. And I'm looking at these guys. These are scary looking guys. I mean, they're big guys. They lift weights all day. They got tattoos, dreadlocks, crew cuts. They're not smiling at me. We're walking around the yard. And I mean, these guys are looking very, very intimidating. And they show me the classroom where I'm going to be teaching. And it's a dingy old day room. There's no internet in prison. I mean, I got nothing but a marker board and I got to come up with 99 hours of class content. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to pull this thing off? And honestly, if it hadn't taken me 7 years to get there, I would have not done it.
Yeah.
I would have waited for something better. So there's a process to this. If you trust that I needed that 7 years to say yes to this job because I was needed at that job. Funny how things can work that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I took it and I said, I'll just figure it out as I go. And the first couple classes, nobody would say anything. They all just sit there and stare at me. They don't know why I'm there. These guys are very careful with who they trust.
Yeah.
They're conditioned that way. And they're asking me these questions. Why are you here? Why do you, did you get in trouble where you had to come and teach here? Why would a guy like you be in this prison teaching us? And finally, I just told them, look, man, this is what I want to do. I want to teach. Nobody would hire me. So this is where I ended up. This is where I'm going to start. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, they realized, okay, he's only here to help. And after that, they couldn't have been more respectful, nicer people that you'd ever meet. Not just in a prison, but anywhere. So my eyes are open to, here's all these big, scary guys that look like they want to riot when I first walk in the gate, to here's a bunch of guys that made a mistake, or maybe they had a bad night. I wouldn't say all of them wanted to never come back to prison, but a lot of them were real sorry that they got there,
Yeah.
weren't in a position to help their families now. And they were looking for any way to get out of this lifestyle because the recidivism in prison is very high. Once you go down that road and you come out with a felony, well, the jobs are very limited. So you're going to go work in a factory somewhere. You're not going to make enough money to feed your family. And then what do you do when your kids are hungry? You go back to what got you into prison the first time. I mean, it happens all the time. So my job, as I learned it, was number one, to convince them that they could do it. That was the big hurdle, that you don't have to keep coming in and out of prison for the rest of your life if you don't want to. We can erase that felony by you starting a company. Because if you come to me and you're providing value to my life, I'm not going to ask you about your prison record. I would never do that. It doesn't come up. You know, if you want to come work for my company, I might take a look at your background. But if you're willing to do a service for me at a price that I think is fair, I'm not going to ask where you came from. So once we got past that, then it was just, let's try to boil this down to some very simple business principles that somebody starting out needs to keep them from running aground early.
So just for clarity, were you teaching them business and entrepreneurship, or what was the crux of what you were keen to, or what you were teaching them?
That's a great question. I came up with a logo for my class, and it was a triangle. And I said, now this is my holy trinity of entrepreneurship. It's a three-sided triangle, of course. Number one, I'm putting up here in gold letters, sales. Your job as you start a business is to sell value to people, and you've got to be good at it, because if you can't get any customers, it doesn't matter how good it is.
Yeah, value.
Yes, if you can't convince me that what you're doing is going to bring value to my life through a sales process, it doesn't matter how good it is, because you got to be good at selling. Number two, you've got to be good with money, because you're going to have to wait to get paid typically, and you're going to have to pay your bills before you get paid. And it's going to take some discipline there to where, you know, you've got to be able to handle money and not spend it as fast as it comes in, and not drive the company deep in debt, not try to grow too fast, not go out and buy a bunch of trucks and people when things are going good, like I did. And then number three, hard work. You're going to work as hard as you've ever worked in your life, and it's going to be weekends. It's going to be late nights. It's going to be hustle, hustle, hustle to try to make it, just to try to survive the first year. When, you know, you look at the numbers, the first 2 to 5 years, 70% of startups fail. I mean, the number's staggering, but the ones that make it are usually the ones that stayed away from money problems or didn't work hard. The number one reason companies fail is they run out of money. Their concept isn't working. They don't change it fast enough, and the money's gone and it's over.
You've got to be agile, I guess. Have a good idea, have all these things tied down, value, good with money, solid work ethic, and that ability to know when something isn't working. Now I need to pivot, because
pivot is perfect.
Information I've got tells me that this isn't quite what the market needs, where they're seeing the value.
Exactly. I mean, what my company does, we sell metal lockers, just like you had in school, you know, metal boxes. But we didn't start out doing that. We started out doing something completely different. And after a few years of trying to sell all these different products, we realized, well, we're making all our money over here. So let's just do that. And we became a specialist in that product. But we only learned that because we experienced it. We would have never started out in that direction. And in fact, people who didn't know thought it was crazy to specialize. But we were like
part of this podcast, My Perfect Failure, we learn from the new information that we get. It's making sure that we look at the information, because it's there for a reason.
It's exactly right. And you've almost got to get out there and test the waters a little bit and say, okay, I'm not making any money doing this, but over here I'm making a little bit of money. So why don't we just focus on that and forget this? And whatever it might be. For instance, I had a guy, I had to get rid of some ivy in my backyard, and I called a landscaper. He said, I'm a landscaper, but I don't even own a lawnmower. He said, I just come in and do the special work. I found my niche. My niche is taking care of ivy problems. And that's all I do. But I didn't start out that way. I started out trying to do everything for everybody. And I found this is where I can make $1.
And then we narrow it down. So the prisoners that you were teaching, sometimes I've definitely heard this over the years, that sometimes, particularly with entrepreneurs, sometimes we have to be in a space where we've got nothing to lose. So we can put our energies into my own thing, because this is where I'm going to have the control. Going back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, is there a little bit of that in prisoners where they're in a situation which clearly isn't ideal? And like you say, for many of them, if they could make a different decision, they would have made a different decision. And now they're in a situation where they, I guess, are incarcerated. So being in a situation where they've got nothing to lose, having someone like you come in where where they can really absorb a lot of the information you've given them, does that give them not an advantage, but it gives them the ability to put all their energy, thoughts into what you were teaching them?
You're exactly right. The one thing I learned about the prison system, and it was just through observation, was if you come from a low income group, if you're a person of color, and if you don't have much education and you break the law, your chances of going to prison are astronomically higher than a rich, white, well-educated guy.
Really?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
there's no question. You can look at numbers anyone want. I used to tell them, okay, unless you come from a very white, middle or upper middle class background, for number one, don't break the law. But I think what happens a lot of times is these guys, they don't have a good role model. They're coming from a bad environment, and the guy making the money is making the money illegally. Well, they don't want to go work fast food their whole lives because they know there's no money there. And they have the entrepreneurial mindset of, well, I'm going to do my own thing and make the money. But the only role model they have in this whole environment is a guy breaking the law. So they follow right along that path. I would have done the exact same thing. I worked for my father because when he came home, he talked about the guys that worked for him and the great deals they'd made, and he was proud of them. And I wanted him to be proud of me too. So I could easily see how somebody who had a father or uncle in an illegal business would jump right into that illegal business and try to make him proud of them too at a young age, not having any other options or not being aware of any other options. So absolutely, you've got a guy now, he's got the mindset, he wants to make some money. He never kept records. He got in trouble. He did his prison time. And he wants to take his talents, which some of these guys are very good salespeople. They're very influential. They're very good talkers, and they're very good business minds. But now let's try to steer you down the path that you didn't see before. And you can do something that will gain traction, and you can sleep at night because nobody's going to come knock on your door and take you away. But absolutely, you're talking about a failure. A failure would be doing some prison time, obviously. Can I change the direction of what I was doing and make something permanent instead of make something fly by night that I'm waiting to get taken apart by the law at any time? But absolutely, I think when you catch a guy, the other thing you got to think about prison is there's no alcohol, there's no drugs, there's no women. You're catching a guy when he's very spiritual. I've never seen more people read the Bible or read the Quran in my life.
Yeah.
Because that's all there is. You've taken away all the temptations. So now I'm digging inside and I'm getting spiritual. And I'm trying to think, what did I do to get into this mess, and how do I get out of it now? And I'll do anything, give me some direction. I'll do anything, and I'll work hard too. I saw it a lot with a lot of people that they were ready for a change.
Yeah. As you were teaching and educating the prisoners, did you start to see that progress in terms of maybe them asking more questions about business, entrepreneurship, about ideas, and softening their initial skepticism, and maybe you saw that they had maybe a bit more hope about what their future could look like?
The way I structured the class, we had 11 weeks and we met for 9 hours a week. And I started with page 1 of a business plan, which was, what's your business name? And we're going to come up with a logo for it. And then I took them down the path of every possible thing I could think of: risk management, bookkeeping, sales, marketing.
Wow, masterclass. Wow.
And by the end, if they did the work, I would take home there was no typewriters or computers in prison. So they had to handwrite. I'd bring it home, type it. And when they were done, if they did the work, they would walk out with a 23-page solid business plan.
That's incredible.
With the name of a company, where they were going to do business, who their competition was. I'd do the research for them. And I had guys get out and say, I went to the bank with this and I was able to borrow money on this business plan because it was so thorough that they could look through it and say, yeah, this looks like a good plan. So not everybody did the work. Not everybody would put in the time. But yeah, there were some guys that were ready to hit the ground running. I don't really know what happened to too many of them. I keep up with a few,
Yeah.
But you know, and that's the thing about teaching is you never know, right? You
Yeah.
never really know. You might run into one down the road or two down the road, but you don't know. Typically, you'll never see these people again.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
hope that what you've given them is going to steer them in the right direction. And, you know, there was a lot of guys that didn't buy into it at all.
Mm.
Maybe the older guys who'd been in prison their whole lives and were like, this is it for me. I'm going to be here one way or the
Yeah.
other. But the younger guys, definitely. And
Yeah.
I had some guys with some great ideas, with some great talents. And I like to think they're out there running their own show somewhere, you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
because
Absolutely. I'm sure they will. I'm sure at some point when it's totally unexpected, you'll get a random email or something, or a random phone call, somebody that was on one of those programs reach out to you and say, I'm doing this now.
it would be wonderful. You know, that would be one. Because really, I looked at it this way: when they gave me 10 people for the class, first day I could probably rule out half the class. I mean, they just weren't into it, and I could tell. I might be able to change some of their minds, but even if I just got 1 or 2 out of 10, it was worth it because now their kids got somebody taking care of them. You know, when you're in prison, your family sends you money,
Mm.
and you're looking at guys with children. I mean, they feel terrible about this. Believe me, I had guys break down and cry
Mm.
because their family doesn't have any money for Christmas presents because they're sending him money for commissary. He
Mm.
doesn't feel like a man anymore. But if he can walk out there and find a way to support his family, you know, he's feeling alive again.
Yeah.
So it's
And
huge.
yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. So again, listening to some of your content or some of your interviews, you spoke about the actual prison service where I'm not sure that they totally got it, or maybe they felt that these guys were becoming more confident and maybe more hopeful, and that maybe doesn't totally fit in line with how they want these guys to be behave when they're in prison. So maybe you can expand around that.
Absolutely. So I'm in opposite philosophical camps with the people in charge because my job, if I want to convince you that you can go out and start a business, I got to build you up a little bit.
Mm.
Well, their job is to beat the guy down so he
Yeah.
doesn't try anything. So I'm building them up. They're breaking them down. They don't like the new swagger some of these guys are getting. And the other thing, I kind of made a rule that anybody that wanted to come in off the prison yard and learn was welcome in my class. And they didn't like that either because they didn't like guys being up where they weren't supposed to be.
Mm.
But I had classes where I was doing just basic financial concepts. I'd have, I'm at 10, I'd have 15 more guys in there, 25 guys standing room only that wanted to learn what an IRA was or what a debit card is. I mean, just basic financial stuff. So I got in a couple years and it's like something changed where they weren't smiling at the guards weren't smiling at me anymore. They weren't being friendly to me anymore. I could feel the
The energy
momentum.
change.
It was changing. Then one day they wouldn't let me in the front door. I came to teach my class and they said I didn't have the credentials to be in there anymore. And I said, well, I've been here 3 years.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have them. We're not going to let you in. And that was it. They wouldn't like, I just, here's the other thing. I didn't work for the prison at the time. I worked for the community college. So
Okay.
I was paid through the college. They couldn't fire me because
Mm.
they didn't hire me, but they could say I couldn't come back in, and that's what they ended up doing.
Mm.
But I could feel it coming. You could kind of feel the
Yeah.
tension
Mm.
of
You know what, that's really odd. It's really odd to me because I kind of maybe I've got an idealistic thoughts about how the prison service should be. Because if I was the governor of a prison or I had any relationship with a prison, I would want, or even anybody in society, you want people that are in a process of being reformed that are going to be released at some point because they're going to, not all, but some of them will. If you're not alive, you're going to be released at some point. So you want them to be released, in my eyes, with new skills, new hope, a totally different way of thinking about how their life could be. And you were part of that process, giving that to them. So I know that the prison system, I'm naive about how it operates on a day-to-day basis because I've never been in that environment. But you would think that what you would do is like godsend.
some of the people that I met on the outside and their families, they thought I did was doing great things.
Yeah,
The guys that were trying to keep the prison in order, they didn't like it at all. I was giving these guys
that's
information.
weird.
I was making them feel, well, I mean, here's the
That's
thing
odd.
that I told people on the outside. In order to take my class, you had to have less than 2 years to go.
Okay.
It's okay. So everybody's getting out pretty quick.
Perfect to me.
Yeah. And so I told him, who do you want living next door to you? This guy
Mm,
who has no job, he's got a felony on his record, and he's got no plan. Or do you want a guy who's out there hustling, trying to start his own business to
mm,
feed his family? I mean, it's your choice.
yeah,
We can go either way with this, but if we're not going to arm them with any skills or information, don't be surprised when they, come back. We
yeah.
haven't really given them a choice, as I see it. Because
Okay.
and the thing of it is too, when you run a small business, you're into efficiency. And what I learned is I don't have to invest very much in some of these guys. They're ready to run.
Yeah.
They just need a little guidance and a little encouragement. And it's a great investment
Mm,
because they're ready to go. They don't have the basics. And the basics are
yeah.
pretty easy to give out.
No, I think what you're doing was amazing, and I just think it should be adopted on a larger scale and really developed because, yeah, I don't know huge amounts about the prison system, but I would hazard a guess and say that these types of programs are kind of like that. They're in the huge minority, and the prison system needs relief. People need hope, particularly if they've got 2 years to go.
They're getting out, right? And they're going to have a big transition ahead of them.
Yeah.
From all of a sudden, they have to make decisions. They have to, be a
Mm,
member of society again. And when it's all been taken away from you for 24/7 for it could be 7, 8 years. It's a difficult transition anyway. But if the best job you can get pays minimum wage and you've got kids, that's really
yeah.
not going to work.
Doesn't work.
Right.
Essentially you're sending them down the road where they came from, which got them into trouble. So you really need to nip that in the bud and actually give them the tools, the skills, the hope that they can really look at something completely different where they can become self-sufficient.
It wouldn't be that hard, and it doesn't have to be all of them. I mean, I think you could easily go into any prison and separate this guy's not coming back, and this guy, he probably will. And let's take the guys that really want this and let's give them what they need. Let's separate them because they're not all the same. The system builds them up to look the same. They wear the same clothes. They're called by a number. There's no difference between a guy who got in there for a minor offense or a guy that got in there for murder. They're bunkmates practically.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it doesn't make sense to me that we can't take the guys with potential who are pretty easy to spot and treat them differently and get them out of that cycle because they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but the ones that we could isolate and give a second chance. I think everybody deserves a second chance, but there's some in there that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, 100%. So can I ask a couple of questions? We're getting towards the end now, and I appreciate your time. So
absolutely.
I want to ask, I'm curious about what you learned about yourself during this experience.
Oh, I tell you what, I learned that this is the big one. Okay. When I was 21 years old, I got into the drug game.
Mm,
I had a minimum wage job. And I worked at a restaurant. I started selling marijuana at this restaurant when I was 21 years old.
mm,
And it got bigger and bigger and bigger until one day, the guy that we were buying our drugs from, me and another guy, he said, "Do you want to buy half a pound of marijuana or do you want to buy a full pound?" And we didn't have the money, but we thought, well, I found a guy at the restaurant said he'd buy half a pound of marijuana. So I took the half pound, I put it in my trunk, I gave him the keys to my trunk, and I said, "Why don't you take a look at it? And if you like it, why don't you pay for it? And then we can buy the full pound." Anyway, that very night, they bring in two uniformed police officers into the dining room of the restaurant and the manager. And he says, "We've got a major drug problem here in this restaurant, and we're going to put an end to it tonight." And I'm sitting there, 21 years old,
wow.
thinking, my life is over. They know what's going on.
Mm,
They know it's in my trunk. It's just a matter of time for I'm going to prison for this. And I would have. I mean, it was a
yeah.
2 year, 3 year. Okay, I had forgotten that. When I went to prison, I was 50 years old. I had forgotten I even done that. I mean, you want to forget that.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at these guys in there, I'm seeing myself. I'm a different color than some of these
Yeah.
guys, but I took that same stupid 21-year-old risk that they took. I just didn't get caught. Now, when that night ended and I didn't get caught for whatever reason, I never did it again. And I
Mm,
learned my lesson and I was like, that was close. And
mm,
this is too risky. But I didn't know that until
yeah.
when you're 21 years old, you're invincible. So I saw a lot of myself in these guys who had taken the big risk, but it didn't go as well for them. And they were ready to, just like me, drop it and go and never do
Yeah.
anything illegal again. And that's what I learned was I am a lot more like them
Mm,
than I would have ever imagined.
yeah.
I had
And
forgotten that
yeah,
episode of my
it can
life.
be
Yeah.
like a draw.
21 years old, you do crazy stuff. Some people get caught and some don't. And the ones that get caught, their life has changed forever. And it's just not right.
Yeah. But what's really good about what you were doing, and I know you're still doing, we'll get into that in a second, is that you're giving people the opportunity that have got caught to actually tell them you do have another chance. There is another way. You may not be getting this type of support in prisons, but for the people that attended your program, they got total, even people that may have not jumped straight on it, there could be people where those ideas are ruminating in their ideas, and they could be doing things that you're not even aware of to actually think about what their life could look like when they get out.
It's very true. From the business point of view, I was pretty good at measuring how my efforts were rewarded. Did I get this order? Did we make the money? Are we having a good year? Teaching is totally different now. I have a true admiration for teachers in that you're changing people's lives, but you like I say, you rarely get the accolades.
Yeah.
You just keep doing it and you're hoping that it's moving itself forward on its own. So it's a whole different experience. And it's not a very thankful job, but it's a very, very important job.
Yeah.
So yeah. Now we're teaching on the outside. So we don't have the limitations that we had before with the guards and the no internet and all that stuff. So we're trying to take people from the same walk of life, or those recently released, or anybody who's had an obstacle that wants a fresh start, and these same principles of financial management and entrepreneurship.
And what's the name of for anybody that maybe wants to find a little bit more about the business that you're doing now? What is the name, and how can we maybe find you and get a better feel for what you're doing?
Well, thank you for that, Paul. I never really planned on writing a book, but when COVID hit, I had all this time and I couldn't teach in prison anymore. And I went to my dad's wife and I said, well, I don't have any more good prison stories for you because they won't let me back in. And she said, well, why don't you write a book about it? And I said, I think I will. So it took me 3 years. And my goal in this is if you were to read the book and you knew somebody who'd made a mistake and got a felony, you might see what I saw when I got in there was that there's some good people in there that just had a bad night, had a bad role model. The name of the book is Lifeline To A Soul. And the reason I named it that was somebody asked me one time, what's it like to teach in prison? And I said, well, it's like throwing a lifeline to a drowning man.
Yeah.
The problem being he doesn't know he's drowning. He's got no reason to grab the rope. He's fine. He thinks this prison life is pretty
Really
easy.
interesting.
Yeah. So that's now our education company is called Lifeline Education Connection. And that information is on the Lifeline To A Soul.com website, if anybody's interested. And if anybody'd like a copy of the book, I'll be happy to send them. One won't charge them for it. Mention my Perfect Failure podcast, and I'll send you an autographed book. Be happy to do it.
Amazing, amazing. So I'll get a link and we'll put that on the show notes so people can find out more about what you're doing and also the book. And yeah, it's phenomenal what you're doing. And I just think that everybody deserves a second chance. There are crimes which clearly, that are pretty brutal, but I think in the main, people that have just got caught up, that made just one bad decision, similar to what you've described, and you end up in prison, and at that point, your life, I guess, spirals out of control. I think what you're doing is really nipping that in the bud and actually giving people hope, direction, skills, and actually they really can change their lives. So yeah, so love what you're doing and excited to hear how this is going to evolve.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's my pleasure to do it. It's my pleasure to be on your show. I feel like I was bestowed some grace that I didn't deserve at a young age. And if this is my penance, or if this is my way of paying it back, I'm honored to do it, because I could have very easily been in the situation that I saw so many people in, and it's very hopeless. And it's a waste. It's a true waste of talent.
Yeah, totally. And the idea of living in a world without any hope, like every day, that's no fun whatsoever.
I can't imagine. I mean, I was teaching 9 hours a week, but I can't imagine being in there for 5 years, never seeing your family, wearing, you don't get your own clothes. You wear the last guy's underwear. I mean, they trade clothes around. You don't even have your own clothes. The food's terrible. You're told what to do 100% of the time. I mean, you've just been stripped of your...
Pretty inhumane getting people when you can't give them clothes. Really, it does happen. You don't have you have to trade clothes.
Trade clothes. So you're wearing the guy's underwear from last week. I mean, that was one of the big complaints I heard from these guys was, man, I don't even got my own underwear. I just get what they give me.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, it's hard to think, but it's the small things like that that they've just stripped you of all your dignity, basically.
Yeah, that is. Where does the mind go when that's what you're faced with on a daily basis?
It's different. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know unless you got in there. That's the reason
Yeah.
I wrote the book, because I can kind of take you in there and show you the nuances that you'd never know any other way, you know, because
Yeah.
they just don't let anybody walk in there and hang out with the prisoners.
Yeah.
I kind of got lucky.
Yeah. John, so we've got one recurring question for the podcast, which is if you could invite three inspirational people for dinner, there can be liable paths. Who would you invite?
Another great question. You know, when I was teaching financial discipline, I focused a lot on Warren Buffett because I thought Warren Buffett lived what he said, and he was a simple enough way of doing things. So I would love to sit down with Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
I've just always admired him for the simplicity of how he makes money.
Mm.
It's not that hard, you know, don't make it hard. Just go with the principles here. Great with marketing, and he understands consumers. He's brilliant, and he's not showy, you know, and I love that about him.
Massively not showy. In fact, he lives in the same house.
Yeah.
He doesn't drive a big, expensive car.
And I've
Very
respected.
unassuming.
I got a flip phone, somebody told me. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, he's my kind of guy, because
Yeah.
I came from a Midwest agricultural background where these people, you know, made their own clothes, grew their own food. I like that common sense, that salt of the earth.
Yeah.
Another guy that I've always been fascinated with, who's obviously known here, John the Baptist. I always thought he was quite a character. You know, he baptized Jesus, but he didn't get he was a very humble guy.
Mm.
And I always thought he had a fascinating life that it doesn't really get a lot of play.
Yeah.
You know, he's overshadowed, obviously, but I thought he'd be a great one.
Mm.
And I would love to sit down with Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, just for the country simple wisdom that he has. And I'd love to see him in this day and time as well.
Mm.
All of them. I mean, him. Yeah. So
you would be massively enlightened.
I think so.
That'd
Those
be
are
an
my three.
amazing combination of people.
I don't know what would you cook for those three? I don't know. That's something they'd all like.
What would
but
you discuss?
I can't imagine.
What would be discussed? Where would the conversation go?
It would be a wild
Yeah.
trio, right?
Yeah, that would be amazing. That'd be amazing. And so I think you did say, but if people want to get in contact with you, where's the best place to find you?
If you go to the website, Lifeline To A Soul, lifeline2asoul.com, I've got a place there where you can leave your email at the bottom of the page. It'll show you the classes we're doing. We've got some live feed in there, some content, different things we've done. And if you leave me your email address, I will be happy to either mail you a book, or if you're in the UK, I can email you a book. Won't cost you anything. If you're interested in reading the book, I would love to do it. And it'll take you through the gates with me, and you'll see what I saw as I saw it, which was a pretty fascinating journey. It was a wild journey.
I will be emailing you for a copy of that.
I would love to. I will absolutely send you one.
Really keen to read that. So just like I came across this on your website. I think I came across you on your website, or maybe in one of your videos, and I've just written it down. So you will never influence the world. If you try to be like it. You never influence the world if you try to be like it. So you're almost given us that individuality, that entrepreneurship, which I thought, yes, I love it.
It's what it takes. I mean, you have to look at what's out there and think of it differently.
Yeah.
You really do. You've got to give people something they don't have or haven't thought of. It seems simple.
Close.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be crazy high tech. It does have to be different.
Yeah, absolutely. John, taken up so much of your time. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we can stay in touch and have more conversations.
I would love that, Paul. And I'll send you a book. And thank you so much for having me on your show. Like I say, I'm a big fan, and I'll keep listening.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe. It really does help us grow the channel, which we're very keen to do. And your feedback is most welcome. So keen to hear about things you like and equally things you don't like about the podcast. You can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me on the website via the feedback page. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.